Rome 120 AD. Imagine waking in the middle of the night inside a cramped apartment building towering above one of Rome's crowded streets. The city that had roared with life only hours earlier now lay buried beneath darkness. No streetlights illuminated the roads. No police patrols guarded the alleys. No emergency services could be summoned if danger arrived at your door. Then you hear it. A single footstep. Clack. Another. Clack. The sound echoes up the wooden stairway outside your room. Your heart immediately begins to race. Because in ancient Rome, footsteps after dark rarely meant anything good. For millions of Romans, that sound was enough to turn a peaceful night into a nightmare. During daylight, Rome was the greatest city on earth. Merchants packed the marketplaces. Lawyers argued in the forum. Craftsmen hammered away in noisy workshops. Thousands of carts rolled through crowded streets carrying grain, wine, stone, and livestock. But when the sun disappeared behind the hills, Rome transformed into something else entirely. A city of shadows. Shopkeepers shut their doors. Families barred their windows. The wealthy retreated behind walls guarded by servants. And ordinary people prepared themselves for whatever the darkness might bring. Night was not a time of comfort. It was a time of uncertainty. Most Romans lived in apartment blocks known as insulae. These buildings could rise 5 or 6 stories high and were often constructed quickly, cheaply, and dangerously. Entire families squeezed into tiny rooms. Walls were thin. Floors creaked constantly. Privacy barely existed. At night, every sound carried through the structure. A cough from one room. An argument from another. A crying child somewhere above. And occasionally, footsteps moving slowly through the darkness. Nobody knew exactly who was walking outside. That uncertainty made every noise feel threatening. The darkness itself was part of the problem. Modern cities glow with electric lights. Ancient Rome did not. Once the oil lamps burned out, entire neighborhoods became nearly invisible. A person could stand only a few yards away and remain hidden. Shadows swallowed faces. Alleyways became black tunnels. Even familiar streets felt alien after sunset. If footsteps approached your door, you often had no way of knowing whether they belonged to a neighbor, a drunk, a thief, or something far worse. Your imagination filled the void. And imagination is often more terrifying than reality. Crime flourished after dark. Roman writers frequently complained about the dangers of nighttime travel. Muggings were common. Robberies happened regularly. Violent gangs sometimes controlled entire sections of the city. A lone traveler carrying money could easily become a target. Even wealthy senators feared walking through Rome at night without protection. For ordinary citizens, hearing footsteps outside their home meant asking a frightening question. Was someone simply passing by? Or had someone chosen them as tonight's victim? Until the footsteps moved on, nobody could know. Many thieves preferred apartment buildings. The reason was simple. Hundreds of people lived close together. Doors were weak. Locks were primitive. Most families owned only a handful of valuable possessions, but those possessions represented years of labor. A thief didn't need to steal much. A few coins. A cloak. A lamp. A piece of jewelry. Any of these could devastate a struggling family. So when footsteps stopped outside a door, everyone inside held their breath. Listening. Waiting. Praying the stranger would continue walking. The upper floors were especially frightening. The poorest Romans often lived at the top of insulae. These apartments were smaller, hotter, and more dangerous. The staircases leading upward were narrow and unstable. If trouble arrived, escape was difficult. Imagine hearing footsteps climbing toward your floor. One level. Then another. Then another. Each creak of the staircase bringing the unseen figure closer. You cannot see who it is. You cannot ask what they want. All you can do is listen. And hope they're not coming for you. Sometimes the danger was not a criminal. Sometimes it was a drunk. Rome consumed enormous quantities of wine. After sunset, taverns remained busy long into the night. Intoxicated men wandered through the streets shouting, singing, arguing, and occasionally fighting. A drunken stranger could mistake your door for his own. He could pound on it, kick it, demand entry. or start a confrontation for no reason at all. When Romans heard footsteps approaching, they had no way of knowing whether they were about to face a thief or a drunk man looking for trouble. Either possibility was bad enough. There was another reason Romans feared footsteps. Fire. Ancient Rome burned constantly. Most buildings contained wooden beams. Cooking fires remained active. Oil lamps flickered inside crowded rooms. One accident could ignite an entire block. When people heard rapid footsteps racing through the darkness, panic often followed. Someone might be running to warn neighbors. Someone might be fleeing a blaze. Someone might already be watching flames spread through the building. At night, a simple sound outside your door could mean that disaster was only moments away. Lying awake in darkness, Romans learned to listen carefully. Every creak, every whisper, every distant movement. The city never truly slept. Somewhere nearby, footsteps echoed through another hallway. A door opened. A voice murmured. Then silence returned. For a few moments, everything seemed safe again. But Rome's nights were unpredictable, and countless dangers still lurked beyond the thin wooden door. What most Romans feared was not merely the sound of footsteps. It was the fact that those footsteps could belong to absolutely anyone. And in ancient Rome, that uncertainty could be deadly. If you were a Roman citizen walking home after sunset, the darkness was not your greatest enemy. Other Romans were. As daylight vanished, many respectable citizens hurried indoors as quickly as possible. Streets that had been crowded with merchants and shoppers only hours earlier became dominated by a different kind of population. Thieves, drunks, runaways, desperate men looking for easy prey. The safest place after dark was behind a locked door. The second safest place was nowhere at all. Because once night fell, the city belonged to those willing to use violence. A young laborer finishes work late near the forum. His pay for the week hangs in a small leather pouch tied beneath his tunic. He begins the long walk home. At first the streets seem empty. Then he hears footsteps behind him. Slow, steady, matching his pace. He speeds up. The footsteps speed up too. He turns a corner. The footsteps follow. Suddenly, what seemed like an ordinary sound becomes a warning. Someone is hunting him. And in ancient Rome, help is nowhere nearby. Roman writers repeatedly complained about nighttime violence. Wealthy citizens often traveled with slaves or bodyguards after dark. Not because they were paranoid, because they understood the risks. A single attacker could emerge from a doorway. A group could surround a victim in seconds. Even if a person survived the encounter, stolen money could mean hunger for an entire family. This reality shaped how Romans thought about nighttime sounds. Every approaching footstep represented a possibility that could ruin your life before sunrise. Some gangs became infamous within certain neighborhoods. Residents knew which streets to avoid. They knew which alleys belonged to dangerous groups. And they knew that darkness made these men far bolder. A gang member could hide in shadows and watch victims pass by. He could wait silently until the perfect moment. Then the footsteps would begin. Quick, aggressive, closing the distance rapidly. For many Romans, hearing running footsteps behind them triggered immediate terror. Because it usually meant trouble was already too close. Imagine lying awake inside your apartment. Suddenly shouting erupts outside. A crash follows. Then pounding footsteps race through the street. Someone screams. Another voice curses. A fight has begun. You rush to the window. But the darkness reveals almost nothing. Only shadows moving. Only sounds echoing between buildings. This happened often enough that many Romans learned a simple rule. If violence erupted outside, stay inside. Curiosity could get you killed. Even wealthy districts were not immune. Money attracted criminals. Large homes often contained valuables worth stealing. Thieves carefully studied their targets. They observed routines. They watched servants. They learned when owners would be asleep. Then they waited for darkness. A wealthy Roman lying in bed might hear footsteps crossing a courtyard. Not random footsteps. Not accidental footsteps. Purposeful footsteps. The kind made by someone who already knew exactly where he was going. The fear grew worse because identification was nearly impossible. Today we expect streetlights, cameras, and witnesses. Ancient Rome had none of these advantages. Someone could cover his face, move through shadows, disappear into a crowd the next morning. Victims often never learned who attacked them. This uncertainty haunted the population. A sound in the dark was never just a sound. It was a mystery. And mysteries become frightening when they might end in violence. Parents worried constantly about family members who stayed out late. A son visiting friends. A husband returning from work. A daughter traveling between relatives. Every delay increased anxiety. Every passing hour created new questions. Then footsteps approached outside the building. Was it the missing family member finally returning home? Or was it someone bringing terrible news? Many Romans waited through long nights listening for familiar footsteps they desperately hoped to hear. Not all threats came from strangers. Political rivalries sometimes turned violent. Personal grudges could last years. Business disputes created bitter enemies. In a crowded city of more than 1 million people, conflicts were unavoidable. A knock at the door after midnight rarely inspired confidence. Neither did footsteps stopping outside your room. Someone seeking revenge would arrive exactly the same way as a friend. The sound itself revealed nothing. That uncertainty made every late-night visitor unsettling. As midnight approached, Rome grew quieter. But silence did not bring comfort. In many ways, it made things worse. Without the noise of daytime activity, every footstep became clearer. Every movement seemed louder. Every creak demanded attention. People lying awake found themselves listening obsessively. Was someone outside? Did the footsteps stop? Were they moving closer? For countless Romans, nighttime became a battle between imagination and reality. And often imagination won. Because hidden somewhere beyond the darkness were real men who truly owned the night. In the next chapter, the fear becomes even deeper because Romans were not only afraid of criminals, they were terrified of things they believed walked beside them in the dark. For many Romans, criminals were not the only danger waiting in darkness. There was something else. Something far older. Something impossible to fight with a knife. As night settled over the city, countless Romans believed the boundary between the living and the dead became thinner. The darkness hid more than thieves. It concealed restless spirits, unfinished souls, the angry dead. And when footsteps echoed through an empty hallway where no living person should be walking, many Romans immediately feared the same thing. A ghost was nearby. Ancient Rome was a deeply superstitious society. People believed signs and omens existed everywhere. A strange bird call, an unusual dream, a sudden illness, an unexpected noise in the middle of the night. All of these could carry hidden meaning. Most Romans did not separate the supernatural from daily life. The gods influenced everything. Spirits lingered among the living. The dead could return. Therefore, mysterious footsteps heard after midnight often inspired a different kind of fear. Not fear of robbery. Fear of the unseen. Imagine waking suddenly. The room is silent. Your oil lamp has gone out. The darkness is complete. Then you hear footsteps crossing the floor above. Slow, measured, deliberate. The problem is that nobody lives above you. You know the apartment has been empty for months. Yet the footsteps continue. 1, 2, 3. Ancient Romans told stories exactly like this. Stories that spread from family to family. Stories that convinced people the dead sometimes wandered through the night searching for something they had lost. Many Romans feared spirits known as lemures. These were believed to be restless dead who had failed to find peace. Unlike honored ancestors, lemures were dangerous, unpredictable, angry, capable of bringing misfortune to the living. According to Roman belief, such spirits often appeared during nighttime hours. People imagined them moving silently through homes and streets. A strange noise after dark could easily be blamed on their presence, especially footsteps, because footsteps suggested movement, and movement suggested something was already inside the house. One Roman tradition reveals just how serious these fears became. Each year, families participated in ceremonies intended to drive away hostile spirits. During these rituals, household members walked barefoot through the darkness, reciting protective words while throwing black beans behind them. The belief was simple. The wandering dead would collect the beans and leave the family alone. To modern ears, this sounds unusual. But to Romans, it was practical protection. A necessary defense against forces that might otherwise enter their homes at night. Graveyards themselves inspired fear. Roman law often required burials outside city boundaries. Travelers entering Rome could pass long rows of tombs lining major roads. During daylight, these monuments appeared impressive. At night, they appeared terrifying. Wind whispered between stone structures. Shadows stretched across pathways. Every sound seemed unnatural. Many travelers reported hearing noises near burial sites. Footsteps where nobody could be seen. Movement where nothing should exist. The imagination transformed ordinary sounds into evidence of supernatural activity. Stories spread quickly in a city as large as Rome. One person heard strange footsteps. Another claimed to see a shadow. A third swore he heard chains rattling in darkness. Soon entire neighborhoods discussed the same tale. Each retelling added new details. Each version became more frightening. Eventually, rumors acquired the weight of truth. Whether the events happened or not became irrelevant. People believed them. And belief alone was enough to make nighttime footsteps terrifying. Some Romans feared cursed houses. These buildings developed terrible reputations. Residents moved out. Owners struggled to rent them. Neighbors whispered about strange events. Objects moving unexpectedly. Voices in empty rooms. Unexplained sounds after midnight. Among the most common details in such stories were footsteps. Not running footsteps. Not hurried footsteps. Slow footsteps. The kind suggesting someone was calmly walking through the house despite the fact that nobody should be there. The philosopher Pliny the Younger recorded one of the most famous ghost stories from the ancient world. In his account, a haunted house was plagued by mysterious sounds. At night, residents reportedly heard the noise of chains approaching through darkness. The sounds grew closer and closer. Eventually, a ghostly figure appeared. Whether the story was true hardly mattered. Thousands of Romans encountered similar tales throughout their lives. Every such story reinforced the same lesson. Nighttime sounds could signal more than human danger. As the hours before dawn approached, fear often became strongest. The city grew quiet. The streets emptied. Even the drunks and thieves seemed to vanish. That silence created space for imagination. A distant creak became a warning. A faint movement became a presence. A single footstep became a question. Was it a neighbor? A criminal? Or something that should not exist at all? For many Romans lying awake in darkness, the answer mattered less than the uncertainty itself. Because whether the threat came from the living or the dead, the result was the same. Sleep became impossible. And somewhere beyond the thin walls of Rome, footsteps continued to echo through the night. Despite all the dangers, Romans still had to survive every night. They could not simply stop living after sunset. Workers returned home late. Merchants traveled between districts. Servants carried messages. Doctors answered emergencies. Life continued. Yet every Roman understood an important truth. The city after dark was not the same city they knew during the day. Night transformed familiar streets into places of uncertainty. And survival often depended on preparation. The people who ignored the dangers rarely remained confident for long. Rome had a way of teaching harsh lessons. Before going to bed, many families followed routines designed to increase security. Doors were checked repeatedly. Wooden bars were placed across entrances. Valuable possessions were hidden. Oil lamps were carefully positioned. Parents made sure children remained indoors. These precautions may sound ordinary, but they reveal something important. Romans genuinely expected danger. They did not secure their homes because disaster was impossible. They secured them because disaster was common enough to justify the effort every single night. A poor family living on the upper floor of an insula often faced the greatest anxiety. Their apartment door was thin. Their possessions were few. Their options were limited. If thieves entered, there was nowhere to run. If fire broke out, escape routes could disappear within minutes. As darkness deepened, every unfamiliar sound gained importance. The creak of stairs. The rattle of a latch. The echo of approaching footsteps. The family listened carefully because those sounds might provide the only warning they would ever receive. Rome did have a nighttime force responsible for maintaining order. They were known as the Vigils. Created by Emperor Augustus, these men acted as firefighters and night watchmen. Their duties included patrolling streets, responding to fires, and discouraging criminal activity. Yet Rome was enormous. Its population exceeded 1 million people. No patrol could be everywhere. Many neighborhoods saw little direct protection. For ordinary citizens, hearing footsteps outside still produced uncertainty. Were they the reassuring steps of a vigil? Or someone far more dangerous? Often there was no way to know. Imagine hearing footsteps stop directly outside your door. Silence follows. 1 second passes. Then another. No knock. No voice. No explanation. Just silence. This may have been one of the most frightening experiences for a Roman household. Movement suggested a person. Silence suggested intention. Whoever stood outside was listening. Waiting. Thinking. Moments like these transformed imagination into a powerful enemy. People often feared possibilities more than realities. And the possibilities seemed endless. Some Romans carried weapons even while sleeping. Not because they expected battle. Because they expected uncertainty. A knife placed beside the bed offered reassurance. A walking stick near the door provided comfort. These items could not eliminate danger, but they gave people a sense of control. If footsteps suddenly approached in darkness, at least they would not face the threat completely defenseless. The practice became common enough that many households considered it perfectly normal. Fear had become part of daily life. Travelers faced their own challenges. A person returning home after midnight often listened as carefully as he walked. Footsteps ahead. Footsteps behind. Footsteps crossing a nearby alley. Every sound required evaluation. Should he continue? Should he change direction? Should he run? Experienced travelers learned to trust their instincts. The wrong decision could lead directly into an ambush. And once violence began, opportunities for escape disappeared quickly. The night rewarded caution and punished carelessness. Over time, generations of Romans passed these fears to their children. Stories became warnings. Warnings became traditions. Parents taught young family members to avoid deserted streets, to return home before darkness whenever possible, to distrust strange noises after midnight, to lock doors carefully. The lessons were repeated because they reflected reality. Rome's dangers were not imaginary. Many families personally knew someone who had been robbed, attacked, or worse. The fear survived because experience kept proving it justified. What makes this story remarkable is how familiar it feels. Modern people often imagine ancient Rome as a world of emperors, gladiators, and grand monuments. Yet ordinary Romans worried about many of the same things people worry about today. Crime, safety, family, the unknown person outside the door. The difference was scale. Modern cities possess lights, emergency services, cameras, and communication. Romans possessed almost none of these advantages. They faced uncertainty in its purest form. And uncertainty is fertile ground for fear. So why were ancient Romans terrified of hearing footsteps at night? Because those footsteps could mean almost anything. A thief searching for valuables. A drunk looking for trouble. A gang member hunting a victim. A messenger carrying bad news. A fire spreading through the neighborhood. A restless spirit wandering through darkness. Or perhaps nothing at all. That was the true horror. The sound itself was never the problem. The problem was what might be attached to it. Lying awake behind thin wooden doors surrounded by shadows, Romans listened to footsteps echo through hallways, streets, and staircases. Every sound forced the same question into their minds. Who is out there? Most nights they never discovered the answer. And perhaps that uncertainty, more than any criminal, ghost, or disaster, was what truly haunted the nights of ancient Rome. Long after the footsteps faded away, the fear remained.